This evening we'll be continuing with Madhurya Kadambini by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. We've covered the first two chapters, and in the first chapter I asked for a review last time, now I'll just do the review myself. There was three main subject matters: Krishna and Krishna's position as the source of all rasa and the form of rasa and the supreme source of everything. And the second topic was, as Krishna is supremely independent, Bhakti likewise is supremely independent. Everything else that's fruitful, Gyan and Bhakti and Yoga, they're dependent upon Bhakti, not vice versa. Bhakti is independent. And then the third was, how does Bhakti begin in Bhakti's manifestation in this world? And we heard that Bhakti produces Bhakti. Some people say other things, and he refutes those other things. Bhakti produces Bhakti. Three main themes. Then chapter 2 was the unfolding of Bhakti, once Bhakti begins. So very quickly, just the Shraddha, Sadhusanga, and Bhajana Kriya phases. We heard about types of unsteady and steady, leading to steady, different types of unsteady devotion. And one of the questions asked yesterday is, how does one go from that unsteady to the steady? And that's passing through the stages of anartha nivritti leads to steadiness, and that's this third shower. And I think what I'm going to do is this evening just cover what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur expresses, and maybe tomorrow evening start again, because there's so many teachings from our acharyas in addition to this that I think will just embellish. So please remember that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, when he was still young, before he even went to Vrindavan, still as a student, studying under his spiritual master Sanskrit and the literature of the Goswamis, he had written a commentary on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and Ujjvala Nilamani and Briyat Bhagavatamrita. So this is a later work which is simple essences from Nectar Devotion or Rupa Goswami's teachings, specifically the 9 stages of bhakti. So obviously it's not each chapter represents one of the stages, because chapter 2 is 3 stages. And chapter 1 was, how does bhakti begin? So it's not just per chapter by chapter, but the themes and the important points that we should understand and glean from the unfolding of bhakti. So this is the Anartha Nivritti chapter, chapter 3. Very relevant for our personal practices. He gives this definition, very straightforward. Anartha means something unwanted, and nivritti means clearing or cleansing or removal of unwanted things. Maybe some of you are familiar with the 4 called Purushartha: Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Anyone has not heard that before? Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. You've all heard. So this word Artha in those four generally is translated as economic betterment or wealth, artha. And it's economic betterment or wealth is used because that's what most people want. Artha is something wanted, something desired, something coveted. Artha. And anartha, its opposite, is something unwanted, just exactly as translated here. So anartha, the unwanted things, are to be eradicated. And something that we discussed yesterday also is these stages overlap. They're not like you move from this bucket to that bucket to that bucket, rather something that is in the beginning stage, it continues and continues and continues. It just matures or becomes more complete. And we'll see a little chart about this as we go along. So he makes the special explicit statement, the eradication of unwanted things continues into the higher stages. And then he analyzes by asking the question, anarthas can be understood based upon their origin. Where does anarthas come from? And he indicates that there are four categories. First is anarthas, unwanted things in the heart that arise from sinful activities. So that's pretty straightforward, easy to understand. When previously we engage in sinful activities, then something appears in the heart that's unwanted. And so the process of bhakti helps to eradicate those sinful the reactions to those sinful activities, or the unwanted things in the heart that arise from sinful activities. A little more difficult to understand is anarthas that arise from past pious activities. So that's a little puzzling, perhaps. But it's not so difficult to understand, actually, because the result of pious activities is that one gets some pious result, or the fruit of piety. And until one's heart is fully cleansed and pure, there's a tendency that causes implication in unwanted material existence, trying to be the enjoyer of those past pious activities, the fruits of the past pious activities. And then, so the process of bhakti takes one beyond, the potency is there, to take one beyond the tendency to be the enjoyer of the fruits of one's past pious activities. And then a little more straightforward again is anarthas that arise from offenses. And then he goes through, there's different types of offenses. There's, just like we read in Nectar Devotion, there's seva parad. There's offenses that are offenses due to worship. Before you're a devotee, you don't have any of this problem because you don't do any worship. But when you start doing worship, then there can be offenses that arise from seva. So the chanting of the holy name specifically is recommended, a process of bhakti, because it removes things in the heart that may be the result of offenses performed when one is doing some worship or devotional service. And then a fourth is anarthas that arise from bhakti that's successfully performed. Now, how is that? Bhakti, we discussed this briefly yesterday. When bhakti is successfully performed, then one may get some recognition. Oh, you did your something, devotional service, very nicely. So you get some praise, or you get some position, or you may be given some contribution or some donation, some wealth or something, some recognition for your position. So we read about that one, Tarangarangani, if you remember, being the enjoyer of those past activities, or excuse me, the devotional service. Nicely done. So he details these. From sinful activities, there are 5 kleshas that result. Ignorance, false ego, attachment, hatred, fear of death, from sufferings that arise from past sinful activities. So bhakti can help eradicate. Then the past pious activities, the manifestation of this may be addiction to the enjoying the results of past pious acts. I can think of some very pious people who enjoy their piety, and they enjoy the fruits of their piety, and bhakti is checked. You know, they're not, their inclination for bhakti is curbed by that spirit. And enjoying sattva-guna things. Krishna seems to like fade in importance in the lives of persons that have this addiction or a tendency for enjoyment of sattva-guna things, or even higher, the desire for liberation. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that these past pious activities and the tendency to be the enjoyer of the results of them, it's sometimes just folded under the list of kleshas, another klesha number 6. But he places it as a separate category. This is now analyzing from where do anarthas arise. So from past sinful activities, from past pious activities, and then from offenses. Especially, he right away goes to nam aparad, the offenses against chanting, and he indicates that in this case, namadi means beginning with the holy name, and it's all the limbs of bhakti. So, fortunately, the holy name and the other processes of bhakti have the potency to eradicate offenses that may come from the other limbs of bhakti, like seva parad. And there's a distinction. It isn't effective when there's deliberate offenses. When you're engaged in deity worship and, I don't know, think of something that's not nice when you're engaged in deity worship. You offer to Krishna something that you know that is forbidden. Or that's pretty wild, but supposing you did like that. So deliberate offenses are not eradicated through chanting. Deliberate seva parads. Then he goes on in explaining that when there is ecstatic devotional service, bhakti that's rendered with great enthusiasm, there may be other angas of bhakti that are not being attended to, but there's not an offense from the neglect of certain angas of bhakti when the overall picture is someone is enthusiastically engaged in devotional service. He makes a reference to Canto 11, Srimad Bhagavatam. There's the whole verse is there, but there's a reference when someone is like closing their eyes and running, eagerly pursuing the goal of bhakti. They may be, running and running and running enthusiastically to engage in service to Krishna. There may be some detail or anga of bhakti that's not being attended to, and his indication is we should understand there's no aparad in that circumstance, because the essence of bhakti, enthusiastic service, is being carried out. And then this fourth is anarthas that arise from bhakti itself. And again, this is the enjoying tendency where some wealth may come, or some worship may come, or respect or position or fame may come. Something may come to that devotee, or you could say even for us, a group of devotees. Something, a classic example was in the Gaudiya Math was Bhaktisiddhanta's remorse that when this marble, beautiful, luxurious Bagh Bazar temple in Calcutta was given to Bhaktisiddhanta, some of his leading devotees got too overwhelmed with the opulence of the place and wishing to make a place for themselves in that place because there was some idea that it would become like the headquarters for the Gaudiya Math, so they want to put their stake in the ground. And anyway, where there's success in bhakti, there's the danger that when wealth comes or worship comes or respect comes or something comes, one may try to be the enjoyer of that. So he indicates, this is one slide indicating, these are sources of aparads, or excuse me, anarthas. Then he spends most of his time with namaparad in this whole chapter because when one becomes free from offenses in the chanting of holy, say it the other way, through the chanting of the holy name one can become free from all of the other offenses except for offenses against chanting. So one has to especially pay attention to nam aparads, and he spends a great deal of time discussing the first one. He calls it the most vicious, and therefore most important amongst the nam aparads to carefully avoid, and that's sadhu ninda. Prabhupada's translation of ninda is vilification. Vilification, criticism, making offense to a saintly person. Vishwanath expresses this isn't just very, very elevated devotees and it applies to them and the run-of-the-mill prabhus. Well, we can go ahead and offend them because they're not very, very elevated devotees. It's okay. You can get away with it. He said, no, not like that. And as far as ninda, he expands over here. Criticism, that's something that you may say. Animosity is something you may feel. And malice is something you may do. So it's not okay just you feel some bad thing about a person, but you don't say it or do anything about it. Sadhu ninda is, in his estimation, the most important one. And who'd want to volunteer? What's the remedy for sadhu ninda if you've offended a devotee? You approach the devotee and ask for forgiveness for that offense. Take shelter of that saintly person. Try to serve that saintly person. And emphasis again, from the same point above, it's not okay if one thinks, well, he's not so elevated devotee, it's not so serious. He's not a pure devotee, so it's okay. I don't have to go apologize for some offense. And then he takes it the other way. Supposing somebody's a very elevated devotee, one might think, well, they're a very elevated devotee. I'm sure they won't mind at all. Kind of a minor thing anyway, and they're very forgiving, so. Here's what one should do. Fall at the Vaishnava's feet, understanding their exalted nature. Why? Exalted because they're carrying bhakti in their heart, and request forgiveness. Supposing they don't give their forgiveness, then what do? Let some time pass and go ask again. Then supposing they don't give their forgiveness the second time, what do? Wait some time and go back again and repeatedly express your repentance and your wish for forgiveness. And then he says, if still that Vaishnava for some reason is not explicitly offering forgiveness, then one can constantly chant the holy name. He makes a little detail that sometimes goes on. Well, I said something offensive because they have some defect. So that doesn't help the offense. It compounds the offense. Yeah. And even if, because an elevated devotee is naturally forgiving, it's necessary to approach that person anyway and seek forgiveness. So like this, he doesn't go through all the 10 offenses against the chanting of the holy name, but he addresses some of the other ones, and we'll just go through the list that he covers. Number 2, considering the demigods to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Krishna. He addresses it this way, because Krishna is in the Vishnu Tattva category, and the demigods commonly are in the Jiva Tattva category. So amongst the Jivas, there are those that are covered and those that aren't. And those that aren't are sometimes they're influenced by the feature of awe and reverence toward the Supreme. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're in this Madhurya influenced type of devotion in the liberated soul. Specifically, he mentions Lord Shiva, where both Lord Brahma, this is from Hari Bhakti Vilas, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva and other demigods, if one considers them on an equal level with Narayana, they're to be considered an atheist, taken from Vaishnava Tantra. In other words, these offenses are not pulled out of the air, there's scriptural basis for them. Lord Shiva has a very special position. We could spend half hour, 45 minutes, an hour and a half easily discussing the complicated subject of the position of Lord Shiva, but the simple understanding is he's in his own tattva, and Lord Vishnu is in his own tattva, and one should not consider Lord Shiva and he who is in that Shiva tattva to be the same as and equal to Vishnu tattva. That keeps it really simple, but it's a very complex subject. And Vishwanath's treating of this topic of disrespecting the Vedas is very different. Normally, we are used to hearing equating. How does Prabhupada translate number 4? Huh? Do it one more time. Just Nityananda Pran. Set of 16 people.
To blaspheme the Vedic literatures or literature in pursuance of the Vedic versions.
Okay. So his treatment of this topic is there's a certain class of people, particularly at his time, still today, but particularly at his time, they may speak of the Shruti portion of the literature, kind of poo-poo it, because in the Shruti portion of the literature, of Vedic literature, there's so much emphasis on karma kanda. It's a major part of the Vedic writings. So they may say, oh, poo-poo on that which deals with karma kanda. We may catch ourselves doing that from time to time too. His advice is that's not okay because they're part of this whole process of coming to the bhakti stage, so it may be less emphasis upon and less direct, whereas Srimad Bhagavatam is strong emphasis on and very direct emphasis upon bhakti. So we honor this Paramahansa literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, but the others have their place too. You know, it's a little bit like those of you that took part in the Western Outreach weekend discussion. There are types of preaching. Radhanath Maharaj made a nice little summary of different types, and each of them have a way of connecting with people that have this nature, this propensity or something. And the objective is to recognize them, that they may also come to the position of bhakti primarily by appreciating the compassionate devotee who has dealt with them in a compassionate way, and then they may be willing to take a step, walk across the bridge towards bhakti. So it's not direct, but the intention, according to the capacity of the individual to receive, is to introduce them to bhakti. Now the Vedas do the same, or say it the other way. What we do may be like the Vedas, and there's a purpose behind that portion of the Vedas. It's to help people make a step on the yoga ladder, just like Krishna speaks of in chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita. Here's the highest. If you can't do that, do this. If you can't do this, do the other thing. If you can't do the other thing, then there's an opportunity for you to go forward in spiritual life at each of the steps. So, an offense against the holy name is disrespecting that other portion of the Vedas that's not as much as Srimad Bhagavatam directly glorifying bhakti and the cause, the fruit of bhakti. Now we honor especially Srimad Bhagavatam and such literature that illuminates or expands upon the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the other literature has its place also. Yeah. I've been preparing, not as I don't have nearly the amount of time to prepare, thinking maybe pulling a disappearing act and losing my phone and my computer and forgetting where I am, so I just can be alone for a while. Anyway, studying for Tattva Sandarbha presentation, and this is a major part, not only of the Tattva Sandarbha itself, why Srimad Bhagavatam is to be accepted as the best means of knowing Krishna, but the general approach within Tattva Sandarbha. Jiva Goswami describes the approach that he's going to use for the entire Sandarbhas, and he's very broad. He borrows truth from wherever he finds it, like Paramahansa will do, and sometimes he even recognizes Shankaracharya said something very nice and used a very nice line of logic in one of his commentaries on Vedanta Sutra, and so he was very familiar with these personalities, and in one place, in Paramatma Sandarbha, he suggests in his commentary, Sarva Sambhadani, that actually there could be a sixth Sandarbha, Brahma Sandarbha. He said, but Shankaracharya has already done a good job, so I don't have to do that one. He's made very clear the message of Brahman. Anyway, we're being advised by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur to see that portion of the Vedas that has its emphasis on Karmakanda rituals, and means we should have a regard for that portion of the Vedas that does that, It's not what we do, but it has its place within society. Gradual elevation. Now, how these offenses are to be nullified? Praise the Vedas. And praising those the Brahmanas, who practice and teach the Vedas, although it may not be our version. So now going on in the chapter, removal of anarthas. Here's one of the charts that I promised I would show you. How to read the chart. The eradication from sins starts in the Bhajana Kriya stage, and it becomes absolute at the Asakti stage. Again, from the offenses that arise from the chanting of the holy name, look, it really keeps going. So guess what, Prabhus? We have a lot of work to do in this category of namaparad. Not until you reach Krishna's lotus feet is it absolute. And anarthas that arise from bhakti, well, it starts at bhajana kriya, partial, complete, absolute, at ruchi stage. So this is, the chart tells you, this is where we have a lot of work to do. You know, and continued work to do. At the nishtha stage, good news, is the removal of anarthas is pervasive, which basically matches what nishtha means, is there may be some tendency for nam aparad and some anarthas lingering, but bhakti, when it reaches the nishtha stage, is so strong that those anarthas don't so likely manifest. But they're still there, and the potential is there for them to manifest. And then almost complete, almost complete, almost complete, complete at the stage of prema, and then absolute. So this is where our major work has to go. That's the message of this chart. He asked the question, is it possible for anarthas to arise even after attaining the lotus feet of the Lord? And he gives as the example Chitraketu, saying the maha aparad, that was the apparent, not real offense against Lord Shiva, resulted in his becoming a demon, but actually that it wasn't an anartha, and he retained his prema, so the answer is, at least in his case, no. Now what about Jai and Vijay? And the answer again is no, because their offense was apparent only, and the apparent offense was due to their prema, that is to say, as gatekeepers of Narayana, they understood Narayana's desire to have some combat. He had a chivalrous rasa within him. And so they thought, well, who can be a competitor for us as devotees to do? We can do. So somehow they prayed, make us inimical to you, and then you can enjoy the pleasure of fighting us. Diminish your affection for your devotees. Please fulfill our prayer. Or another place it's written, if you so desire, we'll gladly take that position. Just make the arrangement for us. We'll be your competitor, and we'll fight with you and make you happy. We'll serve you in that way, as if we're in opposition to you. So Vishwanath says this was caused by their love for the Lord. Because of their intimate love for the Lord, they understood his mood. They wanted to serve to accommodate his mood, and so the offense of Jai and Vijay was apparent only. Then, no more questions. Doubt. How can there be any remaining anarthas for one who chants the holy name? like a Jamila? And the answer given is the holy name, being unhappy with the offenses made against it, does not manifest its power. So, someone is chanting and chanting. The question is, the holy name is so powerful. One who is chanting the holy name, which is so powerful, how can any anarthas remain? The answer is, the holy name considers the person who's offensive and withdraws that power. Or as he says, the holy name may be there, but Nama Prabhu is absent. The person may be making a sound, but Nama Prabhu is absent for one who is offensive. And the Yamadutas were rendered powerless to attack a Jamila because he was chanting. Well, even so, intervention by the Lord of Death, Yamaraj, and any other means of purification cannot free him from the anartha. Only the devotee himself can, by eliminating nam aparad's reaction. So that what that means is, even after he was rescued from the Yamadutas, it wasn't over. He still was now in this Ajamila body with whatever propensities for doing sinful activities were there. Fortunately for him, he left that position, went to a Vishnu temple, and engaged in sincere devotional service. And that way he became freed from his sinful tendencies and contaminated existence. Do offenders lose the mercy of the holy name? Yes. Again, this example, Nama Prabhu is not there. He gives two examples. I wish I had put these so you can't see everything on the page. The servant of a vastly wealthy and capable master may make some offense to the master, and the master neglects him. But the faithful servant will continue to serve and continue to serve and continue to serve, and gradually the anger or the displeasure of the master will subside, and he again returns to his position of being rightly situated in his relationship with the master. So similarly, where there are the effects of anarthas in one's life, the life of a devotee, we're all trying to become devotees. So in a faithful way, we should continue serving the holy name and serving the devotees of the Lord and respecting the scriptures and all the injunctions of bhakti, and gradually Nama Prabhu will again accept us in a rightful way. This is the second example, is with someone who gets a fever. Can one who commits namaparad become averse to the Lord, to Guru and devotional service? And the answer is yes. It's compared to when you have a fever. Your feverish condition, you lose your appetite altogether. And the very thing that is meant to give you strength again, you become very weak with fever. You don't want any, you're not hungry. Even if somebody asks you, just take some soup, take something liquidy, and no hunger, don't want to eat anything. But if one takes proper medicine for whatever the fever is caused by, gradually the fever reduces and gradually appetite returns if one takes the proper medicine. And then the fever is broken, and then one can again eat in a normal way. So similarly, yes, when one who commits nam aparad, one can lose attachment for everything. The Lord, Guru, devotional service, association of devotees, arises from offenses, particularly nam aparad. So what's the remedy? Take the medicine. as with fever. So take the medicine of accepting one's misfortune as the product of one's own creation, one's own offenses, and taking the humble position, gradually overcoming that reaction. Similarly, continue to chant, even without taste, but for purification, and then taste or mercy will gradually return. This is overall, in each of the 10 offenses, to be avoided. There's an antidote, that is, you do the opposite. Say if you've offended a devotee, you go and pay obeisances and serve that devotee, and so forth. Something on the opposite on the other side of the pan scale. And constantly chant the holy name, and each one, and constantly chant the holy name. So the constant chanting of the holy name is always recommended, kirtaniya sadahari, and gradually the well-being of the living entity can be restored. He ends the chapter with just covering what the 9 stages of bhakti are. There's the Sanskrit, adaushraddha, tatak, sadhu, sangha, etc. Here's the translation. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. Universally, almost always, Prabhupada would include in the bhajana kriya stages where initiation takes place. Then, by execution of devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment. Yay! Just like that. Attains steadiness, nishtha, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. So that's Rupa Goswami's teaching, which he's reiterating. So he does this from time to time. He'll give the questions of the doubting person. Purva Paksha, it's called. Why doesn't offenseless chanting of the holy name eradicate all anarthas immediately? Well, it does, doesn't it? Offenseless chanting eradicates all anarthas immediately. And then one can, see Krishna. Here's the fruits of offenseless chanting. As a fruit tree bears fruit only in season, so also Namaprabhu reveals his mercy upon the offenseless chanter in due course of time. So one may be situated in offenseless chanting, and the prema stage may take some time. Or sins committed in the past due to past bad habits are as harmless as the bite of a serpent without his fangs. So it's not past sins committed due to bad habits. They become eradicated by the offenseless chanting. And then a nice point, somebody with some very serious illness or lamentation or other sufferings of a devotee, they're not due to prarabdha. Rather, the Lord is showing his special mercy, and he makes reference. Somebody have their book? 1088:8. What's the verse? Oh, okay. Well, I've got the microphone, so I just have to get the page. I heard, yeah. Yasyaham anugranami harishe tad dhanam shanai tato dhanam chajantyashya swajana dukha dukitam. If I especially favor someone, Prabhupada's theme song, I gradually take away all his wealth, being penniless, his family and relatives reject him, and thus he suffers one distress after another. Prabhupada took shelter of this verse, as you may know. He was destined, he spoke to the devotees, he was destined to be, by his chart, one of the wealthiest persons in India, in the land. And he was on his way, and he was becoming wealthy, and all of a sudden, this thing, that thing, calamity, and the whole thing went away. And instead of going, oh, calamity, he took shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam, understanding the Lord is being very kind. He's showing his special mercy. So it's such circumstances for an elevated devotee as not their prarabdha. See if somebody over on this side remembers what prarabdha means. Prarabdha? Yeah, reactions that are currently manifesting, as opposed to those that are not yet manifest, aprarabdha, and kuta and bija, the other stages. Good. So if there's some present circumstance of your life that's calamitous, the indication is for a devotee, a sincere practicing devotee, not due to their past karma now fructifying, although sometimes devotees think like that. That's part of their humility, but the scripture is teaching us it may be, at least it may be, Krishna's special mercy, taking those circumstances. Conclusion. An offensive devotee may appear to suffer more than a non-devotee. The Masterful Lord may send these sufferings with the plan to increase such a fortunate devotee's humility and his longing for the Lord. When confronted with sufferings or reversals, an offensive person may lose taste within all devotional activities. Offenses are the reason why no symptoms of prema are experienced when performing hearing and chanting. We know this from second canto Srimad Bhagavatam. It teaches like that. One is to be understood that one's heart is steel framed if when hearing and chanting and discussing topics of Krishna, the heart doesn't melt. Tears form in the eyes and ecstasy of love for Krishna are not being experienced. So there's an answer to the person who, the small print there. Someone might say, well, I haven't done any offenses, so how come I'm not getting the full benefit? Something's wrong with Krishna. That's it for chapter 3. Very important chapter. So like I said, what I would like to do is tomorrow evening begin with some additional from our acharyas, additional thoughts or statements or teachings on the anartha vritti process. Very important for us. So, Jai Jagannath, welcome back. We missed you.
I wanted a question about the fourth offense to the holy name. It seems that the underlying mood of the person making statements about the Vedas is important because
yes,
In the first canto, we see Narada Muni disparagingly speaking of the literatures, calling it a place of pilgrimage for crows, abominable, not very beautiful, and in order to induce a sort of Vyavasa Yatmika Buddhi and Vyasadeva.
Yeah.
He's speaking very critically there. So I was wondering about that aspect. It doesn't seem like it's so
there
black and white, let's say.
No, it's not black and white. This is the slide. I'm sorry, I'm getting lost here. Disrespect of the Vedas. Well, there's a nice little morning walk conversation where Tamal Krishna Maharaj is asking the question, what's the difference between calling a spade and offensive criticism, and I forget what the third one is. So what Narada Muni, to your point you're bringing up, is what Narada Muni is doing is he's educating and training his disciple. Of course, he's training us at the same time. Vyasadeva is writing for us. So when a person is, for edification's sake, making a distinction and not speaking in very, glorifying, flowery and pleasing words about the Vedas, pilgrimage for the crows and rubbish literature and things like that. That it's that there are other places where it's very sweetly spoken, like the verse that just immediately follows that. The pilgrimage for the crows verse, the pilgrimage for the swans verse, and the next verse says, it doesn't look so good. When there's literature within that speaks of impersonal realization, doesn't use that language. It speaks of life beyond the modes of nature, but there's no direct glorification of Lord Achyuta. Doesn't look so good. What to speak of those other literatures that just speak of fruitive activities? Anyway, so there's different ways of saying, yes, there's a difference between deriding and vilification, where it was just one is in a literally just disrespectful. I mean, this is Narada Muni, who has received knowledge of the Vedas from the original preceptor of the Vedas, Lord Brahma, and sharing that with Vyas, who then has compiled it. So he's already said there's nothing wrong in what you've written, but there's an inordinate emphasis on fruitive activities, which people already have a tendency to do, and not sufficient glorification of the personality of Godhead. So, the Vedas are compared to a desire tree that produces everything. But then there's the ripened fruit of the desire tree, and that should be specially coveted. Srimad Bhagavatam has a specially coveted position. But now specifically your point, when one speaks of those other portions of the Vedas, we shouldn't deride them, but at the same time, when one is like Narada Muni, speaking to his disciple, or Prabhupada instructing his followers, or like Rupa Goswami, Jnana Karma Anavratam. We're not pursuing jnana and karma as the fruit of devotional service. Those things that come from the activities of karma and jnana. We're advised against that. We had this not the same question, but the same type of question, where on the one hand we're to avoid unwholesome association, on the other hand we're to be compassionate to people who are non-devotees. It's not the same, but there's some similarity. There's what we should know. We don't intimately associate with and take the association of non-devotees, but we care for them and we extend ourselves to them. So it's not the same, but similarly, we know the position of the other parts of the Vedas, and we should be very clear what the other parts of the Vedas are. We don't intimately associate with them and derive knowledge from them, but we understand what they are, and they have a purpose for the rest of society, just as why Vyasa compiled them. We don't trash them, but we don't intimately associate with them. And part of not intimately associating is, make the distinction stark and clear, like Bhaktisiddhanta would do sometimes in his writing. Good question. Yeah.
Maharaj, it was mentioned that the individual who commenting with faith and eventually the come off like a fever wearing off. But on the last slide, it said that one of the effects of namaprad is you lose your contemplation on mercy. You lose your taste in the process of hearing and chanting. So it seems to me to be a contradiction how someone who commits that namaprad, he may not be able to continue with faith, chanting and hearing.
I understand the logic, but it's not like, this is the only way to look at things, or that's the only way to look at things. They have their overlap and their interaction. It's not just cause and effect. And there's lots of those circumstances in Vedic writings. This affects that affects this. They're not exactly, linear. This is the cause and that's the effect. They have interacting effects upon one another. Do you understand my point?
Yeah. So he might lose most of his taste, but something might remain, which might be enough to compel him to keep going, and then eventually more taste will come. And
sure.
Like that.
Sure.
Okay.
Right behind you. There you go.
My question is about this statement. The sickness, lamentation, and other sufferings of devotees are not due to prarabdha, but...
Sounds like you're reading from the book. What page are you on?
This is 32.
Page 32.
It's basically the same statement that you had.
Page 32, okay. Now you're reading what?
It was the part that mentions that the sufferings of the devotee are not due to his prarabdha karma, but they're due to the Lord's mercy. And so I was wondering, when one is starting off as a non-devotee and then they sort of become a devotee, is this like a gradual shift, like in the beginning?
Yes, it's gradual. It's not buckets.
So in the beginning it might
be
like...
when you get illness, it may have to do with your karma. But when Jai Jagannath gets illness, it's his pastime. Behind you? You have...
Maharaj, after chanting these 10 offenses, we also say that it is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting.
Speak slowly. Consider you're speaking to a deaf man, almost dead and deaf. Slowly, please.
Sorry. After reciting the 10 offenses...
After reciting the 10 offenses...
So we recite that it is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting.
Yeah, that's number 11.
Yeah. So, my question is, a new person who has just started chanting, so generally we kind of encourage him to chant more rounds, come to 16 rounds. And then we see that, but due to his, schedules and other things.
Due to his what?
Due to the circumstances.
Due to the circumstances.
Yeah.
And other things.
Yeah. So his chanting is going late and he's just doing it, finish the rounds, quota. So
you have somebody in mind that you're thinking about?
sometimes me also.
Oh, really? I wouldn't have been able to guess unless you told me. Okay, go ahead.
So, of course, like one of my friend was asking me this. So.
Oh, it was one of your
Yeah.
friends. Okay.
So this, this. So should we advise him? And he is not initiated. So should we advise him to adjust his life and then increase the round so that he doesn't commit this offense of chanting inattentively?
You know, everything is so individual. It's really hard to say a cookie cutter answer to a question like that. Things are so individual. So quantity has its place, quality has its place, circumstances has its place. You know, the person's, the caliber and quality of their faith is very important to consider. I'd like to meet your friend, though. I'd like to meet your friend.
Oh, okay.
But if not, then you do the best you can.
Yeah, he's in India actually. So.
He's in Jaipur.
No, India.
He's in India.
Aurangabad. Yeah.
Somewhere else in India besides Jaipur.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but just irrespective of this person's specific situation, does that count also towards an offense?
What should you do? The extreme, the radical extreme is don't chant until you can chant defenselessly. And then, when you can chant defenselessly, then you should start chanting. No, that's not a good advice. So now, your question, is it okay or is it wrong? Is it okay or is it wrong? It's okay. Now, should they try to improve? Yes. And which way should they try to improve? Well, it depends on the circumstance. Quantity has its place, even if they chant at night. Quality has its place. We encourage both, depending upon the circumstance, which is best. Depends on the circumstance. For someone, keeping that vow, even if they must chant at night, that's good. For some persons, it may not be so good. Maybe it's better to advise such a person, just chant your morning rounds really carefully. But then you may find that person that chants their morning rounds then doesn't finish all their morning rounds because they know they have some time to chant in the evening, and then they chant the lousy rounds in the evening, and then start to shrink all around. So anyway, it depends on the person and the circumstance. Yes, over here.
I recall reading that it's the mercy of the Lord to let someone make spiritual advancement as well as retain his material possessions.
As well as what?
Like to retain his material wealth, being opulent materially. That's also the Lord's special mercy. And then it's saying here...
That was from the previous chapter, right?
I think so.
Yes.
And then it's saying here, when he takes everything away, it's a special mercy.
Well, mercy or mercy. It's special mercy to take everything away. It's mercy to give.
Okay.
Which would you rather have? Mercy or special mercy?
It's a hard one. I'm thinking the second one because I like to be special.
Well, so maybe you'll be deserving of special mercy one day.
It's already kind of happening.
Until then, you'll have to just settle for mercy. But he's merciful, so he just gives mercy in different ways. Yes, back here. Oh.
Maharaj, I actually asked this question before to different people, and basically they give two answers, yes and no. And the question is, the offenses that are made in your mind at this age, are they counted or no?
Fortunately. Isn't that good news? Fortunately. But there's something that happens when there's something in our mind. when you contemplate, thinking, following thinking comes to other things, follows the third thing, thinking, feeling, willing, acting. So don't allow that thought that's offensive to remain in the mind. Cleanse it, eliminate it, discard it, because it'll easily move into the other stages. Feeling something about that thought, wanting to do something about that feeling, and then acting. But the thought itself, the bad thought itself, there's no reaction, immediately for that bad thought itself. There's another question right here. Right here.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question.
Did you forget it?
Trying to formulate it. It's like we have so many anarthas.
We have too many.
And there's we're gonna commit more in the future. So I'm wondering how do we go about it's like
how do we get rid of it all?
Yeah,
little by little.
It's like you can become so afraid of committing offense.
No. Don't be anartha nivritti conscious. Be Krishna conscious. If you look at the pile of anarthas, it's intimidating. But look at Krishna, and that's purifying. The means of purification will take care of the pile. So address yourself to bhajana kriya. Do your devotional practices carefully, attentively. That's what to do. Jai Jagannath. Then something over here. Okay. Question online. Can we just go ahead, Jai Jagannath, and question online.
Just following your last statement, we have to become more Krishna conscious through our application of bhajana kriya.
Yeah.
But the nature of the anarthas is that they create weakness in bhajana kriya.
Yes, they
Heard
do.
in the previous chapter.
Well, so if we have faith, even in that weekend state, we go on with whatever faith we have. We go on with the bhajana kriya. So we apply ourselves as best we can. It's like the person that has fever. They can't eat so much because they have fever. But they take the medicine, and part of the medicine is repentance and humility and etc. As we can, as our capacity permits. Okay. Yeah.
This is from Pooja from Virginia. We heard in the first chapter that bhakti comes from bhakti and it does not depend on prior qualifications. Do the different stages described in chapter 2 depend on one's qualifications or one's efforts? Or are they still being given by a madhyama adhikari without specific qualifications as long as one is eager for devotional service?
It's a very detailed question, and I got most of it, but not all of it. Could you say it back again simply?
Sure.
Well, not just read it, but can you say it simply? Do you understand what she's asking?
There are some stages in chapter 2 which I didn't really understand the stages, but she's asking whether these come by
prior qualification or by mercy?
Yes. Or are they given by a madhyama adhikari?
Yeah, please.
Because in the first chapter we're reading that Sri Vishwanath.
I think I can hear him better without the microphone. Go ahead.
That the madhyama adhikari bestows bhakti upon someone with no prior qualification. So now she's asking, is our further development in bhakti also taking place by just a madhyama adhikari's distribution of mercy, or now is our further progress depending on us developing some adhikar actions and putting effort for it? Because it's beginning without not anything.
Okay. an off-the-cuff answer is really easy, but let me try to think of some scriptural message. Well, the message that comes to mind is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's description of how bhakti progresses. It's the combination of two things, it's effort and mercy. And our effort is not grounded, my understanding is, it's not grounded in prior piety or some other material qualification, or one is prohibited from further progress because one has some disqualification of past sinful activities and so forth. Rather, it's the eligibility of a candidate is one's sincere desire for devotional service, or to be situated in Krishna's service. That's the credential that we must carry and strive to serve Krishna, acknowledging it's not just our effort, but it's mercy. So it's a spiritual qualification. That spiritual qualification specifically, as we heard in chapter 1, it's the desire to serve Krishna. However fledgling and neophyte that may be. It's simply a desire to serve Krishna. Striving to serve Krishna, then further progress will come by descending mercy, applying ourselves to the process. I think the answer would be similar to the beginning, so also further stages. It's not dependent upon the material qualification, but the primary spiritual qualification. And according to our position, let's say somebody may be really good at singing. Some other people are really not so good at singing. They can't carry a tune if their life depended on it. But they may like to sing. And so they may not have a big audience when they're singing, but they like to sing, and Krishna accepts, and they're making progress from that offering, although they don't really have whatever material qualification to sing nicely, etc. So we like people that sing nicely to sing, and we like people that cook nicely to cook, not someone that really burns things or doesn't know how to how to cook properly. So they're not the one we're going to engage in the cooking. So, but the act of offering with love, it's not the prior material qualification. It's the desire to serve Krishna lovingly. Prabhupada once instructed a devotee who was asked by Prabhupada to be an artist. And they said, "But Prabhupada, I never held a paintbrush in my hand. I don't know anything about painting." And he said, "Well, try. You tried to do this for Krishna." So after some time, they then again asked, it's not so nice, and should I take some art classes? You want me to do this painting? Should I take some art classes? And Prabhupada said, at that time at least, later on artists did take some art classes, but at that time he said, Lord Brahma has designed this body in such a way that if you practice at something in devotion unto Krishna, Krishna will give you the ability. So it's the bhakti that's the empowerer that bestows the qualification to do services nicely. Anyway, does that address the question, do you think? Okay. Anything over here? On the ladies' side? I've had my back to you, so I'm sorry. Going once. Going twice. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It's often my experience that when I go away from the association of devotees, like if I visit family, it's more difficult to chant.
So don't visit family. No.
So, and one of the
help
things,
your family become chanters, and then it'll be easier. Go ahead.
One of the things that was mentioned is that because of offenses, like our taste diminishes. So, like, is it related in any way that we go away from the association of devotees? And
I got the preamble part, but I didn't get the question part.
my question was, in one of the slides it was mentioned that the taste for hearing and chanting diminishes when we commit offenses. So
okay.
is it like going away from the association of devotees? Like,
no. It's service.
Related?
It's service, it's not offense. And, it's just the atmosphere is less conducive. So you have to prepare yourself for the less conducive atmosphere by strengthening your determination kind of thing. And it doesn't mean now it's going to be easy instead of more challenging. It's still more challenging, but you're prepared for the more challenging. And then you're more appreciating the atmosphere of being with the devotees and practicing devotional service in the association of devotees. One of the best ways to appreciate devotees is to be in circumstances without devotees. Then it really helps to appreciate the devotees. Okay? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I think we're done. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.